With so many different places and spaces to put your hook, it can be easy to wonder, where does my hook go in crochet? I'm Salena Baca, founder, host, lead educator with the American Crochet Association, joined by Goose today, who's going to be barking at anything that walks by my house. And we're here to talk about, where does my hook go in crochet? Now, if you've ever found yourself staring at your crochet project, wondering why your stitch count is off or why your edges look uneven, have you ever done that? If you're not sure where to put your first and last stitches in a row or around, have you ever done that? If so, you're not alone. Stitch placement is one of the most common and frustrating challenges in crochet, but once you understand the basics, everything is going to start to fit into place. Literally, yes, pun intended. No matter if you've been crocheting for decades or if you just picked up your crochet hook for the first time, knowing where to place your crochet stitches is going to be essential to reading and following crochet patterns. This is going to affect your stitch count, the shape of your fabric, and the overall look of your project. The fact is that misplaced stitches can lead to unexpected gaps, wavy edges, or a pattern that just doesn't seem to match the instructions. So if you've ever asked yourself, what counts as a stitch? Where exactly do I put my hook? And do chains count as stitches? Then you're in the right place. I'm here to break it all down so that you can confidently place your stitches and get your crochet looking just the way you want it. You guys can find this article that I'm reading and following along when you click on the link in the video description. If you haven't already, like this video if you like the content so far, and maybe subscribe so you can see more articles like this. So first and foremost, what counts as a crochet stitch? We're going to see things like chain, single, puff, shell. With all the different types of stitches and specialty stitches, it might seem like every crochet pattern is worked up in a very specific way. You're going to see things like skip these stitches, work into this space, don't work into that space. And sometimes, even if you think you followed the pattern word for word, your stitch count doesn't match up. This is a frustrating but very common problem in crochet, and believe me, it is not just you. So to understand what counts as a stitch in crochet, let's start with a few basics. I know you're in the comments here, but raise your hand, let me know if you know the following stitches in crochet: chain, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet. If you've just started crocheting, I'm sure, or I hope that you're aware at least of these basics. And if you've been crocheting for 1,000 years, you know these, surely, right? So if you have learned these, know that each one counts as a stitch when following a crochet pattern. That's right, every single one of these are foundation stitches, and they do count whenever you're working that pattern. If you are just learning crochet, or if you really want to see the nitty-gritty of each one of these stitches, the technical instructions, or a video tutorial for each one, I've got you when you follow this link. Now, you may be wondering, wait a minute, do chains count as stitches? Next time you're wondering if a chain is a stitch, it is. A chain counts as a stitch. Chains are stitches, and they should be included in your stitch count of a pattern. So you can work into a chain, or you can work over it. Either one is correct. Always follow your pattern. It will tell you what to do. But either way, you should be counting them and working into them. Now, there's only going to be one exception to this crochet rule. And that is if a pattern states at the beginning or turning part of the pattern whether the chain does or does not count as a stitch. So if it says does not count, you're going to ignore that chain. That's the only time in your pattern that you will. If it says that it does count, then you're going to mark it and it does count. That's it. That's the only exception to this rule. If you want to learn more about how to apply that rule with the beginning or turning chain, then I have an article that's going to get you started. Okay, let's talk a little bit about basic crochet stitch anatomy. Now, all crochet stitches have a front side, a back side, a top, and a bottom. Do we know that? Yes, no, maybe? Well, if you didn't, now you do, right? Even the smallest stitch, which is the chain, it has a front or a top and a bottom or a back. So you might have missed this fun fact because the chain is so small that the top is actually the front and the bottom is actually the back. Did we know that? Yes, we did, right? We knew that. So knowing the anatomy of each stitch is going to be helpful with stitch placement, especially when a pattern references a particular part of a stitch that you should work into, work over, work around, or below, and so much more, and everything in between. If you want to learn more about basic stitch anatomy, particularly the parts of a stitch, the front, what does front mean, the back, what does back mean, I have an article that will get you sorted. So with everything that we've covered so far, you might be wondering, what part of the stitch should I crochet into? Where does my hook go in crochet? So while this might feel overly complicated, don't overthink it. So your pattern should always give you very specific instructions if it wants you to do something very specific. And unless your pattern says otherwise, it is universally understood rule that crochet stitches are worked into the tops of stitches from the previous row or round by working under and including the front and the back loops of a stitch. So that means you're going to place your crochet hook under the front and back loops on the top of the stitch from the previous row or round, unless a pattern specifically states otherwise. So specialty stitches include variations in stitch placement. So understanding the anatomy of a stitch is going to help you determine where your hook should go. I do have some pictures and some better descriptions so that you guys can see what a back loop is, what a front loop is, what it means to go through the front of the post of a stitch or through the back of a post of a stitch. So if you want to see some better pictures and some better instructions, I do have you covered when looking at the front of the stitch and when looking at the back of the stitch. Here in this tutorial, I am just showing a double crochet because it's nice and tall, but that means that it is going to be, I don't want to say slightly different for a single crochet or half double crochet, but just know that because this is a taller stitch, there are a lot more loops, there are a lot more parts. So those different stitches, their anatomy is going to look different. Okay, crochet patterns. Now that we have all of these details, all of these tips and tricks, you just want to test your skills, right? So I have this really fun exercise of a pineapple stitch that uses a lot of different basic stitches all together, and it creates this really specific pattern, right? So you might be looking at this and going, well, there's a lot going on here, and I'm skipping places and I'm working into places, and there's chains and there's doubles. What do I do? What counts as a stitch? How can I follow these instructions and get to the end of the row? And how do I know if my stitch count is correct and if my instructions are correct? So I'm not going to spoil it. Go ahead, go through these to see if you can count what the final stitch count is for a particular row. It's a really fun exercise, and see if you get it right. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to quickly move through there, but just know that I do have the answer. If you don't scroll all the way down, if you kind of want to test your skills, I do have the answer, and I do have a breakdown so that you can really fully understand what it means to count all of the stitches within a piece of instruction so that you can test the stitch count and whether or not that's correct. Okay, so I've also picked out some very specific patterns that you guys can view for free on our website so that you can really test out what it means to place your hook into your crochet stitches and fabric to match the pattern, right? So I specifically picked out some fabrics that have specialty stitches that are worked into very specific places and spaces so that you guys can create some really simple textures, some complex textures, some complex fabrics, and really test out where your hook goes in crochet. So I hope you have a lot of fun with that. All right, everyone, that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this tip, if you learned some things, please let me know in the comments, like this video, subscribe, you'll see more like it. And please share this video in all the places that you enjoy crochet if you think they will enjoy it too, because I'd really appreciate it. All right, everyone, peace, love, crochet. Thank you so much for being part of the ACA. I'll see you next time.